Oh, Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all thy sons command, car ton bras se portait l'épée, il se portait la croix. Ton histoire est une épopée de plus brillant exploit. God keep our land glorious and free. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Thank you very much, Mr. Blanco.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Madam Clerk,
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. None this evening.
I entertain a motion to confirm the agenda. Moved by Councillor Bodner, seconded by Councillor Elliott. All those in favor? Carried. Are there any disclosures of interest this evening? None indicated. Do we would show that, please? I call for a motion to adopt the minutes of the regular meeting of Committee of the Whole 18-16 held on September 26, 2016. Councillor Demeray moved by, seconded by Councillor Kenny. All those in favor? Carried. Determination of items requiring separate discussion. Councillor Bodner.
Mr. Mayor, item 1 and item 7, please.
Councillor Elliott.
Item 4, Mr. Mayor.
Any more on my left? On my right? Councillor Maine.
Item 3, please.
Councillor Demeray.
Item 1, please.
Are there any other items? Separate discussion. We're good? I'd call for a motion to approve those items not requiring separate discussion. Moved by Councillor Kenny, seconded by Councillor Demeray. All those in favor? Carried. Are there any presentations tonight, Madam Clerk?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. None this evening.
Thank you. Delegations. We have a delegation tonight from Mr. Thomas A. Suhaki for 10 minutes. If he wishes, come forward to the podium over here. Right up there. There you'll see a little red button if you could touch that, sir. This is regarding the fine that he received under the City of Colborne open air burning bylaw and requesting that the fine be waived. Go ahead, Mr. Suhaki. Yes, again, you have 10 minutes.
Thank you. I wrote a little letter, so I'd like to just read it and go from there. I'd like to request the fine for $1,695 charged to me for 3 open air burning complaints to be waived by the City of Port Colborne. I'm a non-resident that owns property at 208 Lakeshore Road West in Port Colborne. My family has owned that property since 1961. I purchased it out of my mom's estate in 2007. The property's been known as the Port Colborne Beach House, and I rent it out as a vacation rental home known as PortColborneBeachHouse.com. During the week of June 22nd to 29th, I hosted a bass and walleye tournament at my beach house for some friends and some family. On the evening of the 23rd, we had a small fire to cook our fish, hot dogs, and marshmallows. Our fire consisted of clean, dry, natural wood as described by the bylaw 6280/106/15 and was intended for cooking purposes. Someone called in the complaint. The fire department showed up, inspected the fire, and asked me to extinguish it, which I did. I was then handed an open air burning notice. The fire department responded to 2 more complaints, again on July 13th and 24th. These fires were started by my rental guests. On the 25th, I was informed by my tenant that there was a fire ban on in the city of Port Colborne. I simply just did not know this. The fire department showed up a 4th time on August 19th. My tenant was cooking s'mores at the time. Apparently, somebody called in a complaint to the fire department at a fire at a neighbor's home. And while serving a notice to that neighbor, they stopped at my beach house and gave my tenants a notice. They asked to have the fire extinguished. My tenants complied. First, I'd like to apologize to the fire department and the city of Port Colborne for all the calls to my property. I thought that when I received an open air burning notice that I was not allowed to have a fire for 12 months. I believed my guests were still allowed to have fires, providing that they had the intentions of cooking. I simply didn't know about the fire ban. I live in Cheektowaga, New York, and I was unaware of the fire ban being implemented on July 6th. I didn't find this out until about July 25th from my tenant. Had I known this, I simply would not have allowed my tenants to have fires. Thirdly, the complaint on August 19th wasn't called in for the fire at that my tenants were having. It was called in for another location. And it was after the fire ban was lifted. It was small, it was supervised, and consisted of clean, dry wood for the purposes of cooking. For these reasons, I'd like the fines to be waived if possible. In the future, I'll be more aware of fire issues, fire bans, and open air burning bylaws that the city of Port Colborne puts in place for the safety of the residents and the community. And attached to my letter, I just showed some pictures of my fire pit and how we cook over it. And that concludes my statement.
Thank you, sir. Would you just wait there for a minute? There may be questions from members of council.
Sure.
Does any member of council have a question to Mr. Suwaki? Councilor Kenny.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to, when you were giving your presentation, you mentioned that your tenant was aware there was a fire ban.
If I said that, I made an error. They weren't aware until after a notice was given to them. And then when I came to check them out, they made me aware
Okay.
that there was a fire ban.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Demery.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Excuse me, through you to Mr. Suwaki. Sir, I would like to have some idea of how many times the fire department had to visit your property before you actually received a fine.
Before I received the first one in June,
A fine, an actual fine, not a notice, but a fine.
3 times after I received my notice in June. 3 times after I received the notice in June.
Okay, so that would mean 4 times altogether.
Correct.
Before an actual fine was issued.
Correct.
Okay, and did you ever have a conversation with anyone from the fire department to speak about these issues? And were you ever told that we just simply don't allow fires?
After I received my fine June 23rd, I spoke to Tom Cartwright, and he told me that it's complaint driven, and if anybody just doesn't like your fire, basically they could call in and the fire department has to respond. And at that time, after conversing with him, I understood that I was not allowed to have a fire for 12 months. I thought someone was targeting me. So that's when I decided not to have any more fires. But I didn't realize that it was the location. The property was not to have any more fires.
Okay, did any of your tenants who were visited by the fire department, did any of those tenants let you know before a fine was issued that they had had a visit from the fire department?
They told me that they had visits by the fire department and that they were issued notices. And I thought, okay, you are not allowed to have a fire for 12 months.
Okay.
It's unlikely that they're coming back.
Okay, so that sort of made it clear that no one was allowed to have a fire.
It really made it clear when I found out that there was a fire ban.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions on my left? Councilor Doucette.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Through you, sir, to Mr. Sahoki. How many times has the fire department visited your property in the past 3 to 4 years?
I'd say like 3+ years ago, there was a neighbor that had an issue with fires. They since have moved on, and then there wasn't any until June 23rd. And years ago, that was like 3+ years ago, from the way I understood the bylaw was the fires were intended for cooking purposes. So I put a lot of time and effort in having a fire for cooking purposes fire pit.
Okay.
And then they disappeared. There was no more complaints. So I thought I was okay going into this season, just the way it has been for years.
Okay. I'm going to make a comment, and I'm going to ask Mr. Cartwright something, Chief Cartwright something after. My camper is not here. My camper is in Quebec. We have private property up there. First thing I check before I leave is always to see if there's a fire ban, because they have had them in the past, especially with the kind of temperatures that we've had. I think maybe that might be a good habit to get into.
Yeah, boy, I learned fast.
Okay, so, you know, I'll just leave it at that. So,
Okay.
you know, I do it all the time. Before I leave, that's the first thing I do. So that's number one. Chief Cartwright, how many times has, through you, sir, to Chief Cartwright, how many times has the fire department visited that property in the past 3 to 4 years?
Through your worship, I went back 5 years. In the last 5 years, we've been there 11 times and issued warnings on 11 different occasions. And during the course of this year is when we invoiced them. If I could just take a second to explain the reality of the bylaw.
Okay.
The bylaw does provide for cooking, but upon complaint, we go and either the owner extinguishes it or we extinguish it for them. Added to that, in this particular case, I believe I did have a discussion with you earlier this summer in the sense that I believe it was yourself that wanted me to come to the property to look at the fire pit you had built as you show here in the picture. And that I had told you at that time that I wasn't in a position to be able to authorize fires and I wouldn't visit the site because that would lead you to believe that I was in agreement with the equipment that you had provided. And I think that's an unfortunate misunderstanding on one of our parts, but the reality is all of our calls there were complaint driven, and if I could just allude to the fact that if I'd just like to bring a point of clarity with regards to our last visit to the property, while in attendance at a call down the street, the neighbor to this home pointed out to us about the fire that was burning in the backyard, and his comment to my captain, who I've clarified with over the course of the weekend, was that if I got to put my fire out, they got to put their fire out. That often happens in our job. We get on a street, and quite frankly, there's been several occasions over the last number of years where we've been asked to put out 3 and 4 fires because one neighbor tattletales on another neighbor.
Okay, which means it was a complaint, so at that point, They were gone there. They had gone there at that point. So I have difficulty releasing you from this, I'll be honest with you. And the reason for that is the fact that they have visited 11 times in 5 years. You've known that was the issue. It's not like you didn't know. And then on top of that, with the whole condition of the whole area, the whole peninsula was under a fire ban. Not only Port Colborne, it was the whole peninsula, the whole Golden Shoe area was under a fire ban. And then yet you had a fire. I find that very difficult
Yeah,
to
understand
accept.
that. Yeah, understand. I didn't know about the fire ban. So, like going into July, just thought, keep it small, cook with it, use the wood that I provide. And that's basically it until the surprise. So,
Any further questions from any councillor? Being none, thank you for your presentation, sir. We appreciate that. And my feeling from the horseshoe here that we're not in favor of the fine being waived. If there's any discussion, further discussion that any councillor wants to make, please speak, or we'll waive the...
so do I hear you correctly? The fine is not being waived?
That's correct, sir. Okay. Unless someone wants to make a motion otherwise. It would appear there isn't, sir. Thank you for your presentation.
You're welcome.
Mayor's report, very briefly. In accordance with Fire Prevention Week, our firefighters hosted a morning, early afternoon event at the fire hall, and it was predominantly geared to young children. It was an educative function, and there were a lot of points that were nice for myself to have them refreshed. It was a good day, and I thank the firefighters, Chief Cartwright, for that. Secondly, on your behalf, I attended a luncheon with Premier Kathleen Wynne today at noon. You can appreciate that the cost of hydro was one of the hot topics. Also wind turbines, and I think she had a good feeling of the way that people in Niagara feel about this issue. Basically, that's my report for this week. Anyone have any questions? Being none, Regional Council Barrick is not with us. I would assume he's given his regrets, but I can tell you there that the budget discussions are starting to go full force, and that we will be likely submitting our budget within a period of time after full consideration. It's a huge binder, as you might appreciate, but I want to just place a thought in your minds that we have our own budget. The deliberations will start very soon as well. Are there any councillors' items that require a response? Councillor Doucette?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. One of the main issues I have right now is that we have had a couple of constituents that have decided to get Johnny on the spots, and they put them on their property and they leave them there. In one situation, there were two, and they were there for most of the summer and were never emptied. They were 6 inches from the property line. We're being told that there's nothing we can do. They don't even have to come in and have a permit to have them. So I would like this council to at least give direction to Mr. Ecolina's department to at least investigate, find out if we should have a permit, and then find out if there's a way for us to control where they go. Especially in one situation, the Johnny on the spots were 2 feet away from her kitchen window, supposedly. Okay, and I went by and that's what I saw, but I don't know if they were there all summer. So anyway, is there a way for us to through you, sir, to Dan Aquilina, is there a way for us to at least investigate it and see if there is anything out there that we can also approve that would help us out with this kind of situation?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councilor Doucette, absolutely. We'll look into it ASAP.
Thank you. Now, by the way, just to let everyone know, they are gone. They're not there anymore, but they were there for most of the summer. So.
And you'll bring a report back to council, Mr. Aquilina?
Yeah.
Yes, Your Worship.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Any other items of interest, discussion, members of the council? Yes. Councilor
Thank you,
Maine.
Mr. Mayor. I have several here, as usual. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Dan Aquilina. I got a call today right at about 4:30 about grading at the CMT subdivision. Apparently there's a fellow that called me up. He's buying the house on the corner of, would it be Schofield and Sugarloaf? And he was concerned about the neighbor's house. He says the grading is at least 2 to 3 feet higher than his yard. Now, there would have to be a swale in between those two properties in order for the guy to have it raised. He was in. I know he's been in the CU, but he wants me to ask the question.
What was the municipal address, sir? Mr. Maine, what municipal address?
He hasn't bought the house yet.
Okay.
So he doesn't, it's the corner of, I guess it would be the corner of Hampton and Sugarloaf. It's a ranch-style house. The first house that was built there, I think.
Back on it.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Maine, there is an overall master grading plan for that entire site. Each individual building permit has to also submit a lot grading plan. There are easements on the property, there's a stormwater management system, but anytime a house is built, we have a deposit. We then go back out once it's completed to review the site and to ensure that it conforms to the grading plan and to the overall master grading plan. So we can look into it, but every property on there that's been developed and has gone through the actual permit would actually be complying with the grading plan. But I got the note of the property. Did you mention, was it the southeast corner or the southwest corner of the CMT?
I think it's the southeast. It's the ranch-style house. It's right behind Mr. What's his name? Just building a new big mansion there. It doesn't matter, but it's that house. I think you know the house.
Yes.
Thanks, Dad.
You had more?
Oh, yes, I do. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This one is about charges at Tallwood Manor. I got a call, kind of distraught call, an upset call last week about a lady who has an inspection. She has a bed and breakfast, and she sent me some invoices from 2009 to present date. And these invoices for the inspection of four smoke detectors and 2 carbon monoxide detectors started out at $115 in 09, and in 10 it went up to 114, and 11 it went to 116 again in 12. 2013 it jumped to $170, and last year it was $174.15, which she's learned to live with. She can budget that kind of money. She's a single person who is trying to exist on what money that she does make. And 2016, she gets a bill for check the 4 fire extinguishers and the 2 carbon monoxide detectors, in and out, pet the cat in 20 minutes. Now, her bill was $621 and I think 15 cents. And she would like to know why it went up 3.5 times what it was the year before. She wanted to know whether it was a mistake on the fire department's part. So having said that, she called the fire department and got a hold of the secretary. And between the secretary and staff, she was told that the issue was with council because the council had approved the rates. Now, I don't know if council approved the rates for 3.5 times more. And she doesn't have a problem with the $174 plus inflation. But 3.5 times more in 1 year is just a little bit more for her to chew. Could you comment on that, Mr. Cartwright, please?
Your worship, to Councillor Main and rest of council, the fee schedule was revised and brought forward to council in September of last year and passed. Part of that report included the old fee schedule that had been in place since 2007 with the proposed fee schedule to take effect after September of last year. The fee schedule, the report speaks to the fact there's significant changes within the report. They were broken out into various categories and things of that nature, and yes, there was fee increases for a number of reasons. Council supported it and the report passed, and ever since that time we've been using the new fee schedule. Now, the fee schedules aren't set by the fire chief sitting in his office. We talk at regional chiefs. We look at other fee schedules that are available to us. In particular, Grimsby is one of the leaders in the region for fee schedules, and a lot of the departments are following suit with what they're charging in their community, and elsewhere is doing likewise. So that is one of the reasons the fee schedule is where it is, but most importantly, it was updated. It was an 8-year period that we had last visited. The fee schedule in this municipality has been a point of discussion, not particularly mine, but other fee schedules over the years with our previous CAO. There was some discussion about trying to do it all together, so it was being done as a group versus one or the other, either that or tying it to an increase in the cost of living every year and raise it each year. That never got accomplished, so perhaps that is one thing that could be looked at. But I think the most important thing is it's more than just going to the property and looking at smoke alarms and fire extinguishers. While we're on site, the inspector looks at early warning devices, fire extinguishers, fire separations, doors, storage of combustibles, verifying property use. Written report is done and a letter of compliance. That then is forwarded to the owner, plus we sign off on the license, which is in the process, which is being licensed through the city's clerk's department. There's other costs associated with inspections. For example, the cost associated with the inspector being educated, continuing to be educated, to be recertified. There's other associated costs, the vehicles, the maintenance of the vehicles, the building cost, utilities for the buildings. There's office expenses that come into play, computer systems, software programs, phones, filing cabinets, storage, and so on. Then there's the cost at City Hall. All of those costs are incorporated within the fee schedules, both of mine and other departments within the city. It's not just us going and walking in and walking out. There's far more to that. So then there's the staff cost on top of that, wages, benefits, and clothing, and so on. That's what we've based the fee schedules on, like other departments in the region do, and other fire departments in the region, and I believe other departments in the city do likewise.
Thank you, Chief.
I just have a rebuttal, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much. So what we're hearing is the 13.5% that we put in the budget last year, the 13.5% of the pie, doesn't cover education, doesn't cover clothing, doesn't cover trucks, it doesn't cover paperwork. What exactly does it cover? Because the way I'm looking at it, I don't mind a charge back for someone who breaks a bylaw, just like this gentleman here. He did it, he forced the issue, he should pay. But a person who's paying, and Mr. Sinnes can go along with this or disagree, who pays commercial tax pays 1 3/4% higher than, or 1 3/4 times higher than I would at a residential area. What do these people get for their money? Do they not expect an inspection? And I'll give you a little sidebar. I had a plumber come and put in a new toilet and a new sink. Now, the only people that make more money than plumbers are brain surgeons. So, having said that, they were there for 4 hours, and my bill was $490. 4 hours, $490. I got a toilet and I got a sink. I can't justify saying to this poor woman, yes, we have to recover our cost in the fire department, we have to recover our cost in the city, and at what expense? 3.5 times more than what you paid last year? this really, really upset me. I could see the $174 plus inflation that we raised our budget by, but the fee schedule, and I don't buy it. I don't know how many other people, if you have it offhand, how many other people got charged the same as she did at that same rate?
Through your worship, Councillor Main, I don't have those numbers in front of me. I know our inspection fees this year are in the area of around $11,000 in total this year so far, which is significantly higher than in years past.
Mr. Main?
Just one more question on this subject. Maybe somebody else has some questions. But my point being taken, how much money do you actually make in fees per year? You don't have that figure? You couldn't tell me that you made $50,000 or $60,000 or $70,000 on, because I have to know when you come and look for $58,000 for a new roof or a new pickup truck, that maybe we can get this money back in fee charges. Could you answer that, please, if you don't mind?
Councillor Curry.
Through your worship, to Councillor Main, the number I just gave you is what we've collected so far this year, the $11,000 for inspection purposes only. That's what we've collected. That does include other charges that go out there, fines and so on. But that includes the total cost for this year so far is $11,000. That was as of Friday.
Thank you, Mr. Main. Councillor Kenny.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the chief. When this house was inspected, Chief, how many inspectors went to look at this house?
Your worship, through you to Councillor Kenny, under normal circumstances, I believe one would attend the residence.
And did one attend this house? That's all I want to know.
Your worship, to this year, the inspection has not been conducted to the best of my knowledge. Last year it was. I believe the number, we don't normally do inspections until the fee is paid. I don't believe that fee has been paid.
Okay, and our first-class firefighter with this special training that you talked to us about gets how much per hour?
Again, I don't have that number in front of me, but it would be in excess of $50 an hour.
So we'll just say, we'll say 55. How's that? We'll be nice. And how long did he stay at this inspection?
Again, this year, he hasn't done an inspection. Previous years, I have a record here that indicates Mike had done one, and he had booked in for 2 hours altogether.
So that's cost recovery, Chief. With all due respect, that's cost recovery. If we pay them $55 an hour, and they're for 2 hours, they're getting a special service to get their licensing and everything, so that's a fair price. $55 times 2 or even times 3 is a fair price for the inspection. She's already paying for all those things the chief mentioned, just like we do through our municipal tax. Actually, she pays a little bit more, as Councillor Main pointed out. If I voted for that much of an increase, I need to have a kick you-know-where, because there's no way I would tax an individual who's bringing economic development. I mean, people go there, they stay, they visit our city, and I am not in favor of that amount of money being charged to that particular individual. If it's $55 an hour times 3, I mean, that's reasonable. She can, you know, like, that works out actually to what she was paying before, actually a little bit less. It's $165 when you multiply 55 times 3. So the rest of the stuff, I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, I believe that comes already out of her tax dollar. Thank you.
Chief Perry, do you have any comment?
Your worship, Councillor Kenny, I really have no comment. That's a choice of council.
Councillor Demery.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Chief Cartwright. Chief, I remember at the time that you brought the new fee schedule in front of us, many of us had quite a few questions about it. And I in particular asked if this was truly, if these increased fees were truly reflective of costs. And at the time you went into a lengthy explanation, and it was clear that they were. So it's cost recovery. If these costs aren't recovered through the fees, then they'll have to be borne by the rest of the tax base. So I don't know where we're at with this. We looked at it at the time, we examined it well, we all seem to understand it, and we voted for it. I think that should lay the issue to rest for now, and maybe we can bring it up again at another budget meeting.
Councilor Doucette, Councilor Elliott.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
I tend to agree. We passed it. We are the ones that said yes. Staff are doing nothing else but what we gave them. They are using the tools we gave them, and now we're almost berating someone because he's doing what we told him to do. That's wrong, after all I'm concerned. Okay? Now, if the individuals that don't agree didn't look into it clearly enough and weren't sure what they were voting on, that's possible because sometimes we get so much information. And I have no problems with that. But what I don't like what's happening right now is that we gave them the tools and we're telling them, oh no, you can't use those tools. Well, hold on a minute. If we want to turn around, as the chief just said, and it's our prerogative and we want to reverse that decision, then we have to do it at budget time, which is where we need to do it at. But I totally disagree with what's happening here. We voted on it. We told them it was okay. They're using what we told them to do. Now, let's revisit it. So let's tell staff to revisit it, but that's where it stops. I don't think we have any ability, and I don't think we should, be changing something halfway through, saying, oh, by the way, I need to rethink this. Well, by the way, we need to rethink this. All the budgets are a year. He set his whole budget on this for the whole year. Now we're going to cut him? No, that's wrong, after all I'm concerned.
Thank you, Mr. Doucette. Mr. Elliott.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to Chief Cartwright. Just a couple quick questions, Tom. You said that the fees are based on regional averages, or you had mentioned that Grimsby seems to be the benchmark that everybody's using. Are our fees in line with other fees charged throughout the region?
Chief Cartwright.
Your Worship, to Councillor Elliott, the main focus right now has been in the region to look at the fee schedules as a whole. And it is in the process of being done. Yes, it would be nice if we all could standardize our fees, but obviously that doesn't always happen. Grimsby seems to be the one that a majority of us are trying to follow as close as possible. Not all of our fees are even at that level that Grimsby's are. Some of our fees are less. In fact, they're revisiting their fee schedule right now because when we had used their original schedule to help us set our fee schedule, that was based on a 2014 fee schedule. They're revisiting theirs in the end of 2016 for 2017 year. So that's in the process of being done. Added to that, there's significant other charges that they're adding to theirs. If I could just take a second, Your Worship. For example, the Office of the Fire Marshal through the Fire Code legislation now mandates that we have to witness and do an in-depth inspection. I mean very in-depth. It's 14 pages long every year in all of our seniors buildings. In our community, we've got about 11, 12 of those buildings, and it takes, and that includes the hospital, Northland Point, 300 Elgin, and others that we do. Those charges in Grimsby are bringing that municipality almost $10,000 a year in additional fees that they now are using. So that's something that we have had discussions in our office about that, but we haven't gone into that at this particular time because it's relatively new. Perhaps the next time we do our fee schedule over, that would then come to the plate.
Just real quick, Chief, second question. You said that year-to-date, as of Friday, you had collected $11,000 in inspection fees. I'm assuming that part of those fees have been inspections for the same category that the discussion we're having in that same category of building have been inspected. And year-to-date, have we had any other complaints from anybody else with regards to cost of the inspections?
Your Worship, if I could, those fees are made up of our real estate request, sales of property, insurance companies, relicensing that the city provides for periodically over the course of the year, Yes, there would be buildings similar in nature, but not necessarily identical. Obviously, some of them are more time-consuming, some of them would be perhaps less, although that's highly unlikely. But the reality is, yes, to date, as of Friday, it was around $11,000 and change. I don't know the exact number, but it was just a little bit over $11,000 to date. And we've had one other individual who sells real estate in the community who had promised the client that he would pay the cost of an inspection based on the old fee schedule, and he did question the increase, but after dealing with it and speaking to my assistant, that being my administrative assistant, he's gone ahead with the inspection. Again, we don't do inspections until we're paid, simply because we've been stung in the past.
Got it? Any other questions? I think if council wanted to review the fee schedule, they have that opportunity by bringing a notice of motion to that effect. Then it's back in our court again. That being said, we will move on to consideration of those. Mr. May.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not finished yet.
Okay.
We've had a couple break-ins in town in the last couple of weeks. We had a truck stolen at the marina. I don't know if everybody's aware of that. We had a break-in at the museum, and they went into the blacksmith shop and stole some stuff that probably you'd never be able to replace. I mean, it's 150-year-old stuff. When is the city going to put cameras in more areas than just City Hall? I mean, nobody wants to break in at City Hall, but places like the marina and the museum are just easy targets because there are no cameras. I would like staff to look at what the cost would be to put cameras in at the museum and at the marina. The marina has, I believe, 3 cameras, Peter, or 4, and they just don't seem to be pointed in the right direction at all times. I was at a marina in Kingston that had live webcam, and they used the round ones, and it's 360 degrees, and it's clear as a bell. And I looked at the one that they had out at the marina, and it's really not too clear. Could staff maybe look at that? Because it's disconcerting to me, because somebody could have broken the museum, started a fire, anything like that. I mean, those people work hard for that, and I think we need some cameras.
Mr. Sinnes, will you assume that responsibility of coming back to council with a report on security cameras at those 2 locations?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I believe that what we will do is talk to the marina and the museum and have them bring forward as part of the 2017 budget as to any cameras and costs of cameras that they believe that they should have in order to secure the properties. I know we have, last year we installed additional ones at the marina. The marina, I'm not sure if it covers everything at the marina, so we'll have them look at that and then bring forward something for the 2017 budget for council.
Thank you, Mr. Sinnes. Are you content with that, Mr. May?
Yeah, just one more thing, Mr. Mayor, through to Mr. Sinnes. These people at the museum apparently were pretty crafty. They broke the lock on the blacksmith shop, and they put their own lock on. So you walk by and you see, well, okay, it's locked, right? Whoever looks after it at night. And they could come back the same night, use their key to open up their lock and clean the rest of the place out. So, I mean, they're aware of that at the museum, but that's the type of person that we're dealing with here. They're pretty sharp. Thanks, Mr. Sinnes. Appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Any more points, Mr. Maine? No, okay. Councilor Kenny.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just have one item through you to Mr. Aquilina. Mr. Aquilina, we all received an email from a taxpayer who is very distressed about a dog who was claimed as a vicious dog by the Lincoln SPCA, but the individual visits a taxpayer here in the city of Port Colborne and brings the dog with them with no muzzle on. And I understand that the dog did attack an individual because broke away from the leash as well, but the dog has since been on a leash. leash but no muzzle. This taxpayer sent us a long explanation of how many times she's talked to our SPCA. I've talked to the SPCA. In fact, just before I came tonight, I talked to Amanda Ellis, who was willing to come and speak to us, because there is only so much the SPCA can do. What this individual is asking, and maybe you could give us some direction if that could be done, is that where this person visits, that they have posted on their front window that there's a vicious dog there, and that they take out extra liability insurance. And I was just wondering if you could give me an idea if that's possible. Amanda Ellis from the SPCA suggested that we probably have to get legal guide whether or not that's possible to do, but if you could let me know, that would be absolutely great, so I can get back. If she's not watching, she may be watching tonight. So.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Kenny. Actually, in fact, I had a discussion with Councillor Doucette, and our bylaw that the Humane Society actually enforces, it would need to have more language in there to allow the Humane Society to do certain things that would take care of that individual that you mentioned. I believe that we need to have legal involved because the dog bylaw was written and it was reviewed by legal at the time, so it would be something that I could take care of and then come back to council with a report.
Okay, so just thank you, Your Worship. I just want to ask one more question. So, Mr. Aquilina, so what am I going to tell this taxpayer, that we're going to revisit it? Because I think the perfect committee probably to revisit it and discuss it is the muzzle committee that we have in place. I spoke to Ashley briefly, our clerk, briefly before the meeting, and once we set a muzzle order on any dog that's in Port Colborne, that's, as she said, that's it. They gotta abide by it. But this is a dog coming from outside a municipality. So how do we get that in our bylaw? And should we maybe sit down with the muzzle committee and get that straightened around?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Kenny, my understanding is that dog is muzzled. It's supposed to be muzzled when it enters into Port Colborne. If it's not muzzled and we get the complaint and the Humane Society is then on site, then they could be fined. But my understanding is that dog that you referred to is supposed to be muzzled. The committee did pass that muzzle order. My understanding is it is supposed to be muzzled, but if it's not, that's a separate story, but one that we have to follow up with the Humane Society to let them know that this dog is not muzzled.
It's a separate issue, Mr. Aquilina. The one dog that I'm talking about is not on Pine Street. This is a dog that visits somebody who lives on Silver Street, and this dog is the one that's causing the problem. The Pine Street one we've already talked about. The Pine Street one, the individual that has the vicious dog there, finally put her sign up that said, I have a vicious dog. She had the sign posted, but for some reason on the back door, and I thought to myself, why would you put a sign that you have a vicious dog on your back door when it should be clearly displayed at the front? However, that's a totally different issue that we have to deal with. The one I'm concerned about is the one you received an email from. You received an email from it, just I guess I saw your name on the line, and every single councillor, including the mayor, received that email. What are we going to do about that, Mr. Aquilina? That's all I want to know. What can we do about that?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Kenny, my misunderstanding, I thought the dog that was referred to in the email, if it's the same email that all of council got, I thought in fact it was to be muzzled. So if it's not, then I need to find out why our bylaw does not have that in place.
Thank you. That's...
So you will prepare a report for council's benefit, Mr. Aquilina?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Once I get all the information and confirm things, I'll report back to council.
Okay.
Is that satisfactory, councilor?
That's satisfactory. I just want to go back,
Okay.
Peter, go back to her and say something, Your Worship, so thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Demray.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just further to the points that Councillor Kenny has brought forward, and through you to Dan Aquilina. Dan, while you're looking at that, could you also see if we could actually bar a dog from returning to Port Colborne? That would be a simple way of doing it. It sounds kind of a little over the top, but barring a dog is maybe the simplest way of doing it. But also, as Councillor Kenny said, several issues have come forward since we've been doing a few of these muzzle order hearings, and we've seen a lot of violations come afterward, and there's no teeth to the bylaws. Because once we issue the order, it's there, it's final and binding, but the enforcement doesn't seem to be able to follow it. So I do believe that the Muzzle Committee would be probably the best committee to sit down and visit all the issues around animal control and maybe work with our bylaw division and see if we couldn't come up with something else.
I think those questions will be answered by Mr. Eklund's report.
Thank you.
To us. Any other thing before we move on? We're finished unless you have another item. Go ahead, Councillor Elliott.
You're done? Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just two items. Firstly, there is new planters that have arrived in downtown Port Colborne with trees in them. I've got several complaints about them. A, I'm not sure where they came from. B, they seem to be randomly placed around downtown. Several of them are dented. I don't know if that is by cars backing into them or by some other means. To say that they are not aesthetically pleasing is probably an understatement. I was under the impression that if we were going to put in planted trees that they were going to be in cement or some kind of more sturdy pots. So can staff tell me where we got them from? I don't know, Ron, is that you that looked after it or somebody? Where they came from, and are we going to do anything to remedy the situation?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Elliott. This is a problem we've been aware of since we placed them. These planters, if Council will remember, we had asked for funds for these in the 2016 budget, and the thought process here was that we would replace some of the permanent trees downtown with the trees that come in planters, let them mature for a number of years, and then be able to move them around. Initially, some of the dead trees that were downtown, the flowering crabs, the intent was just prior to canal days was to get those dying trees out. The trees were causing a problem with the fruit and so on. And just prior to canal days, we put the planters in, the new ones, as they were ready, right directly in place of the ones that were removed, which wasn't actually the ideal location. The ideal location has to be somewhere between the parking stalls so that when vehicles pull up, they're not being impinged by the planters that are in place, impeded by them. So that was number one. The placement wasn't exactly where we wanted it. Number two, as soon as we started to put them out, we became aware of this denting issue. One of them was immediately on Clarence Street, immediately dented days after it was placed. And then there were a number of others that followed. So what we've done, we've looked at a couple things. These planters are actually quite good in terms of their method in which they're designed, in that they have a reservoir inside. So the reservoir can be filled with water. It's self-sustaining, and the tree is watered and maintained all the time. The problem with the denting, we weren't aware initially whether this being done by vehicles actually bumping into them, or perhaps the extreme heat was causing this reduction in the plastic materials that were in them. So at the present time, we're working with the supplier. I believe the supplier is from BC. We're working with them to try to get a resolve to it. We're certainly not recommending ordering any more of these type of tree planters until we find out what the actual problem is with them. And secondly, as I said, we want to find a better placement for them. Because of the size of the planters, it's difficult to move them away from the curb line itself without impeding the sidewalk, the width of the sidewalk, and people walking through. So we're working on the issue, we're well aware of it, and we're trying to find a resolve with the suppliers themselves, the manufacturers, to the denting problem. One of the thought processes is that, as a simple solution, we would drill into the planters and then fill them with material in the places where they're denting out, and trying to resolve it that way. But first of all, we want to move with the manufacturer and see if we can resolve the issue. So we're working on it.
Okay, thanks. Second of all is if I was just looking for an update, we had talked about this earlier. The Lakeshore Road water main installation has dragged on for far longer than it should be. I was thinking this was probably going to be a 6 to 8 month project, and it's now well over a year into it, and we still aren't finished. So, Ron, if you could give us an update on where we stand. I know the residents along the lakeshore are extremely unhappy with the process, so if you could give us an update on where we stand.
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Elliott, it's very understandable, the concerns from the residents because of the delays. The main reason for the delays, and I think Council is aware, was the archaeological requirements on the project itself. Once we decided to put the water main on Lakeshore Road West on the lakeside, there was an immediate red flag in terms of the archaeological materials that are in the ground there. We actually got to a stage 4 archaeological study. Every shovel full of materials that had to be taken out prior to the water main going in, had to be examined by the archaeologist. And this caused considerable delays and, I might say, considerable cost. There's a huge cost attached to this. This goes back to the fact that, if you remember early on with the design of the water main, there was a need to place hydrants, fire protection on the lakeshore side of the project. Initially, it was going to be just Bayview Lane, but we were made aware through emergency services of a requirement for fire hydrants along Lakeshore Road West. The design was amended. We found we had cost funding, I should say, available on the project to incorporate that design, but of course we had to do the archaeological works. So that caused a delay in it. So we're at the point now, the archaeological work is complete. The water main is complete and tested except for the portion that goes across the Eagle Marsh Drain on the bridge. We've had to manufacture special hangers. They're being manufactured locally here in Port Colborne. They'll be installed on the bridge, and that last piece of pipe will be installed across the bridge to make the final connection. That'll be done the first week in November. That's when Beam's coming back to do the work. There's been a delay in getting those hangers manufactured to the specifications required by the bridge itself. Secondly, the walkway itself, the asphalt walkway that was there, was in very poor condition initially. A good portion of that has been removed for the installation of the water main. We have our concrete contractor, CTC. They will be here on Monday, October the 17th to start work. The first project on their list is to do the walkway. And now, instead of the asphalt walkway that was there, we'll have a new concrete walkway along the wall. It'll be a great improvement to what was there. The reinstatements for the boulevard along Lakeshore had to be held off, obviously, until the concrete work was done. So they're doing the concrete work starting next week. They have some curb repairs to do for some of the curb that was lost on Lakeshore. Once that's done, Beam will be moving in first week in November, doing all the reinstatements. The walkway should be in place by then. And at the same time, once the curb work is done, we have Rankin Construction coming in to mill all of Lakeshore Road and to do an asphalt overlay on it. So everything's in place, hopefully weather permitting. We're not going to get some early storms, but everything being equal, we should have everything done by the end of November, no later. Everything will be in place and complete.
Including that section of the main hanging on the bridge.
Yes, that'll be done starting the first week of November.
Okay. 2016.
16.
Okay. Just wanted to clarify.
There's no archaeology on the bridge itself. So.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Thanks, Ron.
Councilor Zette.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Hanson. Mr. Hanson, can you pass the word out to whomever designed and built that new garden area that was a mess for a long time at Valet? Just as you went past the pillar there, that whole area was either being ripped up by something or it just was a mess. What they've done with it is beautiful. And I think they should be complimented, and I think that when I see something nice and well done, I have no problem saying that. And whoever did it, and whoever designed it, and whoever put it in, thank you. It's really nice. I'm really enjoying it as I'm going by.
Mr. Mayor, through you to Councillor Doucette, our Parks Department did that reinstatement there. It was a real eyesore at the time. The control of the plants, they were in very poor condition.
Yep.
So what we've done is removed all the material along that section. We've had a contractor come in and put actual siding. There was nothing in behind this planting strip. We've sided it. It looks very nice. And then we're reinstating this with a specialized grass that's available to us. It'll only grow to about 8-9 inches in height, and we won't have to cut it after that. And it's going to look very nice. So it was all done by our Parks Department.
It's beautiful. It's nice.
Thank you, Mr. Doucette. Are we content to move on? Mr. Bodnar.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before I ask this question, was number 8 pulled on the...
Yes. No, I don't have a record of it.
Okay, then I'm going to ask the question because it's my fault for not pulling that. So, yeah, I know, too bad, Ron, but through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Hanson, we took ownership of some fire lanes in Ward 4, and somebody was asking, the recommendation is, and apparently we've passed it already, sorry for not pulling it, but minimum maintenance, it will be done on those fire lanes. Can you tell us what that is? Just some people are unsure what that actually meant.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if I may, on page 120, 129 of the report that's been passed, we included in here, and I think it'd be just as easy just to read through what these minimum maintenance standards that are being recommended and council has approved tonight. If I can just read these 2 paragraphs. The initial minimum maintenance standard for the fire lanes will include grading and placement of stone in the existing width and length of the laneways, with a couple of exceptions, where the laneways need to be extended to the last driveway for access and plowing. The city will immediately install regulatory traffic signs, including stop and yield signs, at all intersections, and provide limited brushing to provide improved sight lines at the intersections. Checkerboard warning signs will be installed at the dead ends where feasible. Routine grading and maintenance activities will be added to the roads inventory to reduce potholes and obstructions. Staff does not recommend any drainage upgrades initially, other than some minor brushing where required to ensure surface flow. From a liability perspective, trees within the road lawns will be assessed as required. So that's the recommended minimum standard for the roads themselves and maintenance. For winter operations, we're recommending the conditions of the laneways dictate that a light-duty vehicle with plow be utilized. The laneways will be maintained to the fire route bylaw standard, removal of snow and ice to a maximum of 6 inches. Staff are currently securing quotations from 3 local contractors that are currently providing contract services to the city for the plowing of the 6 laneways. It is anticipated they will quote on an on-demand per occurrence rate. The city is also considering the option of mounting a light-duty plow on the road patrol vehicle that would assist in the winter operations. So I think those 2 paragraphs really just outline what we have in mind for the first year. We want to see how this sort of flies with the public, with the homeowners, and we'll take some consideration of this into the 2017 budget in terms of what some initial costs might be, and make sure that's included in the roads budget for 2017.
So the roads will be smooth, potholes will be fixed when required. We're not going to expand the width of them or the length of them, except, like you say, if there's a driveway needs to be done. So basically, they'll be in the same place, just upgraded to make sure that, you know, it's reasonably good to drive on. And as far as plowing, I guess there would be some expectation that they'll be done at a reasonable time along with the other plowing. How are we going to monitor that? Are we going to wait for calls from the residents to say, you know, are we, you know, not getting plowed today, or what's the instructions to our contractor who might get that contract?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bodnar, It is our intent, and I've talked to the roads foreman about this, our intent would be to include these on our regular winter road patrol, which is done daily. At the time we expect a storm to come in and we start to experience a storm, the road patrol will advise on the depth of snow, say it's Cedar Bay Road or Silver Bay Road, as it would impact these. That would then trigger the call to our contractor, if the contractor is doing it, to start plowing on the fire lanes as well. So we're going to treat these the same way as we would all the other roads in terms of notifications.
Good.
So in case of an ice storm or something like that, they would get sanded also if they, it was determined that it was an icy condition?
Yes, all the standards again would be according to the road patrol and what the conditions dictate. If it was strictly an ice storm, that would dictate just putting down the sand. They'd be treated the same way.
Okay.
Members of council content now? Okay, are there any inquiries at council? Are there any inquiries that staff have towards previous inquiries of council?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Aquilina.
If I may take this opportunity, it's not really an inquiry. It's more to do with COGECO land being aware as part of our public consultation on the new zoning bylaw amendment. On the second floor, if any member of council has been on the second floor, you will see a series of maps. These are the draft maps for the new zoning bylaw, the entire municipality. So I want to inform the public out in COGECO land that these maps are there in draft form. If anyone wants to take a look at the properties throughout the city, they are there. Staff right now are working on the text. My goal is to bring something back to council for consideration by the end of the year to have the new zoning bylaw in place. So I just wanted to inform council and particularly COGECO land that those maps in draft form are available. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Aquilina. Mr. Bundy.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Dan. Dan, is that also on the website informing people that, that this is happening?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bodner, no. As I mentioned, we're going to start the public consultation process. We're going to get the word out that this is actually happening, that the maps are available, the text will be available, and we will engage the public in due course, and we will notify, put it on our website, and as well the local media to be aware when these actual public open houses will be held. So there'll be a lot of public engagement. That's my plan.
Okay. Moving on to items requiring separate.
Worship, if I could.
Yes.
If you don't mind, Your
Councilor
Worship, to yourself and council, I had committed to council that I would bring forward a report for the rural fire station. I believe it was for the 24th. That report is not going to be completed. It's well underway. I've had initial discussions with the chief in Fort Erie with regards to either interim or long-term relationship with regards to automatic aid. They are definitely interested. He was going to have a meeting with his CAO. We haven't spoken since that time. I'm going to suggest that in all likelihood, the next meeting would be between the CAOs and the two chiefs to discuss the parameters with regards to how that may function. So I'm expecting, hopefully, to have that done for the first meeting of November.
Thank you for those comments, Chief. Is there any other comments from members of staff? And any other issue? Then we'll move on to consideration of items requiring separate discussion. First item is item number 1. Councillor Bodner and Councillor Demray had indicated that this, either one would like to move that recommendation. Councillor Bodner, seconder, Councillor Demray. Yes, Councillor Bodner.
Talking to Councillor Demray, I think I'll just let her ask a question before I read this to see what she might like to do with it.
Councillor Demray.
Thank you, Councillor Bodner. Mr. Mayor, I had wanted to make a friendly amendment to this motion. On the second paragraph, should I just read out what I was intending here? Where it says no further medical marijuana production is to be permitted, I would like it to read either at the offending location or by the offending medical marijuana growers. So in other words, they don't get a license back again. That was it.
Councilor Bonner, do you have any comments on the friendly amendment?
I can live with that, Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Doucette?
Just a question on the amendment. Is that meant to be that in our situation, it was an individual that was using private licenses of other individuals to grow for them and decided to do other things? Does that mean that those individuals that had those licenses, are they also going to be banned from growing it again? And the reason I'm asking that is that they may not have been aware that these guys were overproducing. It's possible they were, and if they were, they should get caught. That's not an issue. But if they weren't aware and they were just going to get their product at the end, then I think we're punishing someone that had nothing to do with it. So we have to be careful. I'm not saying we shouldn't do that, but we have to be careful how it's worded so that the innocent aren't, and those that depend so much on, be punished as well.
I think one of the concerns that I have is the responsibilities of granting a license or not is that of Health Canada, not the city of Port Colborne. So I have some concerns about stepping into their shoes when we don't have any jurisdiction to do so. Councilor Bonner?
But I think that's what we're urging the federal government to do, not us. The federal government.
Okay, point well taken.
Just to clarify that part of the concern.
Yep, Councilor Demery, you.
Okay. I was just wanted to answer Councilor Doucette's inquiry. I fully intended it to be all, because seriously, I'd be hard pressed to believe people were not aware of what was happening there. And I think that the determination has to be made by Health Canada. This is a case of urging them to get tough on the issue, do it once and do it right. That's what it's about. So that's where I'm at with that.
Thank you. Councilor Elliott.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And it may be splitting hairs, but under the last section, now therefore the Council of the Corporation of the City of Port Colborne reserves as follows. Number 2 says that the federal government is further urged to provide that if a serious breach of the rules occurs. I'm having a tough time trying to figure out what's a serious breach of the rules as opposed to just a breach of the rules. I mean, if they've got the rules in place that they're only allowed to grow so much. If they go in and inspect, I mean, this was thousands of plants over. Is it not that serious if it's a couple of hundred plants over or double the amount? When I read that, it was like, I get where we're trying to go, but do we want to wait for a serious breach? Or do you want to kind of screw it down that you guys know the rules that you're operating under? If you break the rules, no further medical marijuana production is be permitted at the offending location. I'd rather nail them down to, here's the parameters you're allowed to grow under and operate under. You break the rules, get out of town.
Councilor Wagner, you.
So I'm asking that, I know the intent is to.
Still working on the first one. And I heard what he was saying, and I'm okay with that too.
Well, we're waiting for Councilor Bodner to work out the proper verbiage. Just a comment, but thinking out loud, Mr. Aquilina, is this also perhaps a potential zoning issue that we could make sure that this type of operation is not conducted in agricultural areas, that perhaps maybe in industrial areas like in many other cases?
Mr. Mayor, this is something that I got to report back to council. Councilor Bodner actually asked for a report. My report to council will cover everything from the zoning to the regulations themselves, and that will be brought back to council. Something I'm working on right now.
And we can have this included in this overall globus omnibus zoning bylaw that we're working on right now.
Yes.
We'll have it in place.
My
for
report will
consideration.
talk specifically as to right now, what the regulations say, what
Yes.
can be done and what can't be done. Be an information report to council for, there may be some direction from that. The new zoning bylaw would possibly look at further restricting, but I don't want to give too much of my report to council. There are certain things that we can do and can't do. So, but it will be something that I further research and report back to council on.
Thanks very much, Mr. Aquila. Mr. Bodnar?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I think I'm ready.
Could you please advise council of your potential amendments?
So on that second paragraph, which is actually, number 2 in there, so that reads, that federal government disclosures provide that if a breach of the rules occurs, no further medical marijuana production is to be permitted at the offending location, and the people holding the licenses also lose the use of said license. Does that cover what we're trying to get? Okay.
The friendly amendment then? Everyone content? Does everyone understand?
Sure. Shall I read it, Mr.
Yep.
Mayor, in total? Okay. Whereas the Council of the Corporation of the City of Port Colborne wishes to ensure the safety of its citizens and prevent another traumatic event like the armed robbery that occurred on September 19th, 2016 at a local greenhouse on Pinecrest Road. And whereas said greenhouse was operating as a medical marijuana grow operation that was grandfathered under the former Marijuana Medical Access Regulations, and whereas after executing a search warrant, the Niagara Regional Police Services Guns, Gangs, and Grow Unit discovered the number of marijuana plants in production at this location significantly exceeded the operator's allowable limit, and whereas there is currently no agency responsible for ensuring these facilities are operating within the limits provided by the prescriptions that their clients hold. Now therefore, the Council of the Corporation of the City of Port Colborne resolves as follows. 1, that the federal government is hereby urged to appoint the necessary authorities to engage in regular inspections of all medical marijuana grow operations that are functioning under the former Marijuana Medical Access Regulations, and that the federal government is further urged to provide that if a breach of rules occurs, no further medical marijuana production is to be permitted at the offending location, and the people holding the licenses also lose the use of said license. And that this motion be circulated to the federal and provincial governments, local area members of parliament, local area members of provincial parliament, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, and local area municipalities for support.
Thank you. Councilor Demery, you're seconding the motion as read. Thank you. Any further discussion of this recommendation? Yes, Councilor Ryder.
Mr. Mayor, I'd just like to mention Councilor Butters isn't here this evening, but she fully supports this, this also.
Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Next item is item number 3. Councilor Main. Do you want to make this recommendation?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Community and Corporate Services, Corporate Service Division, report number 2016-162, subject Ontario Community Infrastructure Fund, formula-based component.
Is there a seconder for the recommendation? Councilor Bodnar? Discussion? Mr. Main?
Yes. Yeah. What I need, and it's to Mr. Sinet, through you, Mr. Mayor, I need the Coles note version of this 40-page. Now, this, we've already exercised this fund previously on other projects, have we not?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Councilor Main. Yes, this is an ongoing program. that has been in place for the last 2 years, and the funds that we were receiving the last 2 years is roughly around $96,000, which is allocated to the roads construction.
So we're in the program already, as I've read. How much, is this matched dollar for dollar, or is it just, if you spend the maximum, this is what you get, their maximum? Is that basically what you're telling us here? You know what I'm saying?
Through you, Mr. Mayor and Councillor Main, this grant program is 100% dollars, and to the municipality for our discretion as to where we use the funds. We do have to report back as to how we use the funds, but there's no restrictions essentially on the funds that we'll be using, and it's a 3-year program. At this point in time, this agreement covers 2017 to 2019. You can see that the dollar amount that we're receiving is considerably higher than in previous years. So they've changed the formula as to how they provide the funding, which means that Port Colborne is receiving in 2017 double the funds that we received in 2016, so 180 to almost $183,000. And then it's continuously going up from there to 200 and almost 260,000 in 2018 and 400,000 in 2019. So it's good news in that we're receiving more money from the provincial government over the next 3 years with this agreement, and then we'll be bringing forward to council at the 2017 budget as to what our options are and how we can look at using the $182,000 specifically.
Thank you, Mr. Sinessa. Appreciate that.
Any other discussion on this item? Recommendation has been moved and seconded. We have a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Next, I have item number 7, Mr. Bodner. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Elliott. Not item number 4.
Thank you, Mayor. Community Corporate Services Division Report number 2016-164, subject Public Transit Infrastructure Fund Program.
Secretary for the recommendation, Councillor Dench. Discussion?
Thank you, Mayor. It's a good report. I'm glad to see that we're still applying for these funds. If I stand to be corrected, correct? Yep. Okay. When you scroll down to page 59 on our package, and you see the breakout of the cost of what we're going to apply the funds to, you get the total cost of $193,000. We're looking for 50-cent dollars. I can understand Elizabeth Street, West Side Road, the canals, trails, promenade improvements, trail entrance, trail signage. What I'm concerned about and what I'd like to know is where the Thomas A. Land and Sports Complex internal trail system for $50,000 comes from. What does that entail? And why did we decide to spend 25% of the budget on that in particular?
Mr. Sinessa or Mr. Hanson?
Through you, Councillor Mayor Maloney. The internal trail system, since it's been built, is like the other trails in terms of required maintenance. We're seeing some deterioration of the asphalt throughout the trails. The one that leads back out to the soccer fields at the south end. So there's been some deterioration. So we're putting money in each year to try to do improvements and asphalt repairs to that trail system. This program here lends itself to giving us matching dollars for the asphalt maintenance in the trail system itself. So that's the thought process on it.
And that's the trail system just inside the park itself?
That's from the area starts at Wellington Street, goes through the park, through the playing fields, right up to the parking lots themselves.
Okay. I was just wondering if, with this particular fund, if that amount of money is well spent directed at that park, and no offense to the park and people that are there. But I think I've heard around the table quite often that cycling tourism is becoming more popular. Our trails seem to need more rehabilitation throughout the area. The Wild Canals system seems to needs an upgrade. Would it be further to our benefit to allocate more money to the trails and signage on how to get people into town on with cycling, to promote tourism? I know the signage when you get into town, that the Port Promenade is part of the cycle route, how to get to H.H. Knoll, how to get to the waterfront, where to go in town. I'm just putting it out there that there seems to be more that needs to be done to the effect on people that are coming into town and getting them into town than it is to fix up the park. And I don't mean that as a slight to the park itself. But when you're talking about transit and the movement of people in and out of town and around town, to me it seems to be more, or should be more, of our focus on that aspect of the transit and transportation project than it is on internally in a park. I'll throw that out because I'm not sure how the rest of council feels about that, but it just jumped out at me that when I saw 25% of the total cost of the project, and I know it's 50-cent dollars we're looking for, would it be more prudent to spend that money signing the trails and making sure that the trails are in good condition? Because we have heard from outside user groups that they would like to see some improvements. So that's why I pulled it, to get comment from the rest of council. So I'll sit back and wait for that. Yeah.
Councilor Doucette.
I like the idea of what Councillor Elliott is indicating. My question is more technical than that. I was once told that asphalt doesn't last as long as cement, and that replacing things that are made of asphalt with cement walks is often more cost effective than putting asphalt. So I'm just wondering, if we're going to replace some of these sections, could we take a look at the cost of doing it with cement? And I don't know whether that comment came from one of your staff members, so I'm just wondering if that's true, or should we take a look at that? Or if we're going to replace it with asphalt, and in another 6 or 7 years we're going to have to replace it with asphalt again, cement lasts on average 20 years, I believe. So if that's true, then maybe it would be more cost effective. I'm just looking at trying to get the best bang for our buck here. If we're going to do this, let's do it, you know. So anyway, through you to Mr. Hanson. I don't know if he can answer that or if he can take a look.
Mr. Hanson.
Mr. Mayor and Councillor Doucette, the market's changed somewhat. There was a time when asphalt was much more economical in terms of putting it through, especially through park areas and wider walkways. That's changed somewhat. We've found on the Lakeshore Road walkway, for instance, that we have a very competitive price for concrete at the present time. That may not stay the same, but having said that, they are fairly close now. In terms of maintenance itself, and these are strictly maintenance items, the thought process here would be to try to maintain what we have in place, including all the trail system. The internal trail system at the Lannon complex ties in nicely with the transit funding itself, because it is a transit stop. There's a transit stop at the Valley Center, and also the placement of bike racks that are there now, again, lends itself to the criteria for the funding itself. So we thought this was a fairly natural location in terms of putting the funding in here, and that's the thought process on it. Either way, 50-cent dollars. We did work last year in the internal trail system. There was some deterioration, and we are spending money on the asphalt as it is now. So it's council's decision, really, and it could be amended. In terms of the signage, You'll see the last item, I think, listed for $10,000. There are suggestions for trail signage replacements. Unfortunately, a lot of the signs along the trail system disappear on a regular basis. We don't know where they go, but they're disappearing. So there is a component in there into the funding for signage upgrades and improvements and replacements as well.
Councilor Dehatt.
So I'm going back to the, should we replace some of the asphalt with concrete? That's all I'm asking. That if we're going to repair some areas and have to fix the base, should we not repair some of it with concrete, eventually replacing everything with concrete? If the costs are almost exactly the same, wouldn't concrete survive better than asphalt? So,
Mr. Mayor, on an initial installation, certainly concrete lasts significantly longer in terms of wear and tear. Just for a repair of spot sections, so if we had an imperfection in the asphalt that was 20 feet long or 10 feet long, it's certainly much more economical to do an asphalt repair on that asphalt trail. We wouldn't want to end up with sections of concrete. But certainly we can look at your suggestion in terms of whole-scale replacements for portions of trails that we have now with concrete, and certainly if it's competitive, we'd definitely look at that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Sure.
Councilor Wagner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just comments on Councillor Elliott's suggestions. I'm in support of that. I think the signage situation we've talked about ever since the trail was built, really, and we've always tried to get all the municipalities together to do some kind of, joint signage that wouldn't confuse people that are on this trail, because there really is one trail, and we have a section of it, but nobody just comes to ride one little section of trail. They ride the whole thing. So for $10,000, I'm not really sure we're going to get a lot of signage replaced for that. And what are we going, okay, I'll go back a step. I'll ask Mr. Hanson, do we have a signage plan in place that dovetails with the other municipalities and also makes the whole circle route a uniform signage area?
Through Mr. Mayor and Councillor Bodner, as Councillor Bodner I think knows, this was never done. There was no consistency as the circle route continued to grow and was extended within municipalities. There wasn't a continuity to the signage itself. We certainly, in the 90s, when the initial trails were built, we went around and took a look at the signage that was available in Fort Erie and different centers and tried to adapt as best we could to what was there. And I think the signage on our sections of the trail is quite good. The wayfinding is very good. So this recommendation on the $10,000 is based on the inventory from our park staff. They've went out, taken a look at it, see what the needs are presently without making major modifications, of course. But it would supplement what we're doing now in terms of the signage that was there and improve the inventory that's missing at the present time. That's all the intent is here.
Can I make a comment about the trail?
One more question. If we were to, okay, so we're already doing work in the Thomas A. Land and Sports Complex on that internal trail. We're going to do it. We're just trying to double our money up on this particular, because we have the money, right? We'd be able to put 50 grand in there and get 50 grand. I really would like to see some improvement in the signage. That would take us up a notch. Really, this is just going to replace and repair different things. I'd like us to maybe invest in making it better and putting more signs. But where are we at? Even, do we have a master plan for this? Because if we're just going to go out there and do something that isn't really going to be a master plan, then, then I'd hate to just waste that money just by putting signs up, because we have the money and we got to put signs up. So that's one question. The other question is, will this pass the smell test from the province if we start pulling money out of that system and putting it someplace else? Can we rejig the money in this, or is it kind of structured that way so we can actually get the money?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bodner. The program of $193,000 in total is both the city funds and also the funds from the grant program. We have to put, it's 50-cent dollars. It has to be work that we would not have normally done without the money from the program itself. So essentially, in order to do all of these projects, we wouldn't have been doing all of these projects without the funding of this particular grant program. Meaning, our share of the funding has to be new funding, which in the recommendation we're recommending that it come from the capital reserve and or the 2017 budget in order for us to do this, because we're basically escalating the progress of doing these projects. And that's the only way that they will look at these at the funding being available to us in order to determine that it's funding for projects that we would not have done in the near future.
Mr. Bodner?
Just one more question. So are we pretty sure we're going to get this money every year? Like, I know anything can happen. And if we are, do we have a pocket full of suggestions ahead of time that if we get it, we pull them out? Or does staff just scramble and put some things together that were, on a wish list? Or do we have an actual plan going forward that if we get the money, these 3 or 4 projects we're going to do?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Bodner. This particular fund, we don't know if it's going to be a continuing fund, and each grant application or granting that comes down either from the province or the federal government, we really don't know what their criteria is until they put out the guidelines of the funds. So in essence, we don't know what's coming down the pipe. So when they do provide the criteria for the grants, then staff go back and review as to what projects that we have that could meet the criteria and bring those forward.
Okay. Councillor Demery?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Hanson, I would have to echo the comments from Councillor Elliott and Councillor Bodner. $50,000 spent on a pathway through a park, and that's really what that is. I don't know about an internal trail system, because if that's the case, there's a lot of parks with internal trail systems that need attention, far more than that one. But we do have a consistent signage plan throughout the entire circle route. We attended a full-day workshop, which I brought 2 of your parks people to, and Harry Hakeem. The 4 of us attended that workshop. Welland hosted it. All the communities along the circle route were there. We decided upon a consistent signage plan. It was put in place. A lot of emails flew around, and we got it all together. Plans are just so good, but we also have signs sitting in the office at Community Services that have been sitting there for a couple of years that never made it up. And they were given to us by the Waterfront Trail System. It doesn't do any good to have signs sitting around if you're not going to put them up. So that's one of the things that we've fallen down in the past. I hate to see that happen again with any monies allocated here. But the fact is, those trails are really important. Cycle tourism is a really hot topic. We thought for a while there that it might ebb a little bit. It's not. It's gaining. It's getting bigger and better all the time. There's some amazing events being planned right now for Canada 150 and the Circle Route. Port Colborne isn't isn't a part of that for a few reasons. One, because we don't have an active transportation committee, which we're meeting on next week to try to get that in place. But another reason is because we haven't stepped up to the plate in the past and worked with the other communities to really promote the trail. We need to start doing that. This is an opportunity with these funds. $50,000 put in a park that is already getting the cream of everything. I don't know, that just really doesn't sit well with me. I would like to see it go to bringing something to Port Colborne that we haven't had before, and that's a really vibrant cycling crowd that comes in. These are people with a huge disposable income. They can do good things for our city, and I just think that's where we should put it. That's all I got to say.
Thank you. Councilor Demery. Councilor Doucette, you had perhaps a conversation about the trail system?
One of the indications was that he wanted to indicate that the concrete would be very difficult to ride on and probably not as safe, because if you fall on the concrete, it would be more dangerous. So he indicated that he would probably not ride on concrete because he felt it was more dangerous. So that was one of the issues, I believe. Okay, and the other one is the signage. The signage is, he's saying that if we put up more signs with the maps, people won't be taken off with those. So that would be an indication of that. Those were the two suggestions that this constituent wanted to indicate to us. So I thought I'd go get it from him since he couldn't talk. So
thank you, Councilor Doucette. Any other comments, Councilor Demery?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to this constituent, I would very much like to meet with you later because it sounds like you would be somebody who could really be a great member on the Active Transportation Committee.
Okay, I think we should continue with the council meeting. Councilor Demery. Councilor, that's it? You have a further comment?
Yeah, just before we get into making changes and anything like that, Ron, can you just explain to me what the $50,000 upgrade at the park gets us? What are we looking to do with that total spend?
Mayor Maloney to Councillor Elliott, it's an ongoing program of repairs to the asphalt since it's been built. It deteriorates over time. We've had equipment running on it. There's vehicles running all the time on the internal trail system, which cracks it. So from a liability perspective, we have to maintain it, and we are doing ongoing maintenance. We did work in 2016 on the trail. So this is $50,000 that would allow us to obviously double the work we want to do in there. If we were to put $50,000 in there on a normal basis, that we can double that up on a regular basis. So it's just a way of deferring our liabilities and trying to keep the trails well maintained.
Okay, and that's where I have an issue with it, because if it's a transit fund, that's what I'm looking at, to spend the money. And like Councillor Bodner said, can we flip the $50,000 out of Lannon and put the $50,000 in signage? That's a heck of a lot of money to spend on signage. But from what I've heard with people that are cyclists, they're not exactly sure where they are on the trail when they get to certain places because there's no maps and there's no indications of you are here, X. And can we put up stuff that becomes more welcoming to direct people into town and where they are? Bike repairs, bike assists, things like that, repairs to the trails that need it, that entice more people to want to come to our area to cycle on the path in South Niagara, in Port Colborne in particular. And I'm not a cyclist, but I've heard from different restaurants and B&Bs and places in town that cycling is on the upswing, and it's a huge attractor of people to come into town. And if we could spend 50 cent dollars on improving our trail and to attract people here because of it, I think we ought to do it. I'm just trying to figure out how we want to make the split, because I'm hearing kind of consensus from council that let's spend it on the trails and parkways coming into town. But how do you want to split it up? You know, and it's no offense. I'm just worried that if they take a, if they take a look at we're going to improve a park, is that really transit? I mean, that's interior. That means you're already here. That's not coming in and out of town. Yeah.
Inside.
Inside? Okay, so
Okay,
I'm at a point where, you know what? Yeah, I could flip the cash from the park to signs and go with 50,000 on a sign and really improve our signage and do a little bit on the park, but I'll throw that out and see what happens. If somebody wants to make a motion, a recommendation on where you want to allocate the funds, so be it.
Councilor Planner.
To be practical, and I'm kind of with Councillor Elliott, but I don't want to throw money at signage and then not be able to do it is the other thing too. We know we can spend it in a heartbeat on that, you know, that trail system in the park. Realistically, through Mr. Mayor to, I guess, Mr. Hanson, what could we use in signage if we threw, you know, if we did take 20,000 off of the Lannon and put it on the signage, so we got 30,000 in signage, can we actually use that? Like within the, is there a time limit we have to use this? Can we make those signage happen? I know that there's, I hear now there's probably a plan available. So tell me we can use it, I guess is what I want to hear.
Mr. Sinester, Mr. Hanson.
Mr. Mayor, it looks like we have till March 31st, 2018 to implement and complete the work that's recommended. This list here is simply a suggestion because it's a suggestion of projects that meet the criteria. The trail, as an example, links to the valley as a walking trail as well. It's not just a cycling trail. It's a walking trail that would allow people to get to the transit stop. It would allow them to ride bicycles if necessary to valet. So it ties into the criteria. I don't see any reason why council couldn't change the breakdown in terms of how they want to see this go forward. If council wanted to see $50,000 in signage, it certainly could be implemented that way in terms of the application. And then we have 2017 to come up with a signage plan or a better improvement, maybe consult with the cycling community and come up with a better plan in terms of signage and really determine what's required from that side of things, that usage. And that gives us the opportunity to do that. These are strictly guideline projects, so I don't see any reason these numbers couldn't be amended to satisfy that.
Councilor Webb.
You to Councillor Demberay. Angie, you're working on the Active Transportation Committee. How solid do you think that is of getting up and running? I've heard lots of interest. So
on Tuesday, we're having a meeting with someone from the region that will bring us to the actual inaugural meeting. But I also sit on the Greater Niagara Circle Route Committee at the region, and that's where most of this work has been done.
Sure. So I was just thinking for the Active Transportation Committee to have some funds, and their first project is signage. I think you're going to get, you know, a little more buy-in because you've already got something on the go. Maybe I'm wrong, but I'm just thinking that would be a good thing. But
You'd be right.
Certainly be prepared to make a recommendation that you know, that we take 20,000 out of the 50 for the Thomas Lannon and put it towards the trail signage, make that 30,000, and you know, and that would be a start on signage. We've talked about it for years. I think we should do it.
Are you, in fact, amending the recommendation? Councilor Elliott, you...
Yeah, no, I'll second that for sure. Yeah. Yeah. We got, it's a chance with 50-cent dollars, you know, let's get it right. If you're going to go and sign something and you're going to use it as an attractor and a director for people so that they know where they are when they're in town, because I've heard that from a lot of people that we don't know where we are when we get on the trail because there's no signs. Let's do it right the first time. So increase it to 30 and drop the 20 off of the land and complex, and I would fully support making an application for the money.
Okay, shall we vote on the amendment first? Recommendation as amended. Is everyone clear on what's meant? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Are we ready to vote on the motion as amended? No further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Item number 7. Mr. Wagner, you made that recommendation?
Yes, I did. Planning and Development, Economic Development, Report Number 2016-163, Subject Lease Agreement between the City of Port Colborne and the Port Colborne Main Fleet Chamber of Commerce for an office at the Roselawn Center.
Seconder to the recommendation, Councillor Kenny. Discussion? Councillor Bodnar.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to whoever can answer this. I think Mr. Hakeem was the, oh no, Evan. So whoever could take Evan's place. In here it talks that we're going to lease to the chamber, but in the lease it allows the chamber to sublet its office to other community organizations. And it mentions one in there. I guess my question is, who says what the organization is, that it's okay? I mean, we don't want to. I've no problem with what they're doing. I just want to know where's the control on this, and you know, obviously they got to come forward and get the okay from somebody. I just want to make sure that that's in place before we go ahead with this.
Mr. Aquilinian?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bodnar, Evan Ott will be the one that actually administers the lease arrangement with the chamber, and they would be allowed to have other community organizations as a sub-leaser. But they got to run that by Evan, who would then approve who's actually going to be there as a sub-leaser. So that's the checks and balances. It's Evan through my department.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Kenny?
Thank you, Your Worship. I was in favor very much of letting the chamber have that office space, but certainly am not in favor of them, after they got that space now, deciding that they're going to sublease it to somebody else. Not in favor of that, not at all. I feel it's important that we take an active role in the chambers, but now, I'm sorry, these ones that are listed, they need to find their own. They need to find their own office space, sir. Thank you.
Any other comments? Councillor Main, and then our CAO.
My comments.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, Mr. CAO.
Sure. Through your worship to Councillor Kenny, there were a number of meetings that were held with Evan, myself, Mr. Hakeem, as well as the executive director of the Chamber of Commerce, and it was always the intention of the Chamber of Commerce to include two organizations in particular, the one that's listed here in the staff report, which is the successor organization to South Niagara Community Futures Development Corporation, as well as Enterprise Niagara. The thought being that we could turn the Chamber's role and location at Roselawn into sort of a business incubator for the city of Port Colborne that would help new businesses get established and get off the ground. So it wasn't a case of, you know, I want to make sure that council's aware that at the staff level, it wasn't a case of giving them carte blanche to bring in agencies that would benefit the chamber as a body, but rather that would benefit Port Colborne businesses and helping them get a leg up when they're trying to open in business. And I'll direct council specifically to page 125, item 12, which is I think in part an answer to the previous councillor question, which was who has control over the subletting, and that section does say that they would require prior written permission of the city lessor, which permission may be unreasonably withheld. Usually it says may not be unreasonably withheld, but we actually have reserved the right to say, no, that's not an agency that we want to have a sublease with. So, like I said, in summary, the intention was to have like almost a business incubation type function occurring at Roselawn in the city's facility.
Any comments or questions on the CEO's point? Mr. Wagner.
Yeah. I really don't have a problem with them subleasing it. I guess, would Evan also say what the price is? I mean, they could get $250 rent and then get $250 from each of the community organizations that are coming in. And, you know, I guess I don't see any dollar figures in there. Maybe I'm really looking for some weird thing here, but you know, the chamber would like to make a few bucks too. So, you know, anyways, I assumed that things were taken care of and in there. I don't know whether that's, I don't see that in there, but would that be something that Evan would say, no, you can't do that? You can't make money on us because we're giving you a break on rent at $250 through you, Mr. Mayor, to whoever might be able to answer that one.
I believe the clause that the CEO pointed out would cover that contingency, that we can unreasonably withhold an assignment. Subject to any discussion by the CEO or Mr. Aquilina. I think that would be the city's position.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think if we did have something in writing as to what someone may want to do in there, who the chamber may be negotiating with, we would be aware of who that person is first and foremost, and then we would get into discussion if they have any terms on any sublease. Right now, we have the lease with the chamber for $250. So I think at the time of when we get actual written confirmation as to who that may be, that would be something we can look at to see what they're charging for sublease. I'm sure Mr. Louis has anything to add.
I think we could probably amend that clause accordingly.
Probably, yeah. Sorry, through your worship, to council, just piggybacking on Dan's comment, I do remember this discussion taking place while staff and the chamber were going back and forth over the issue. And I think the idea, and I don't see it reflected in writing, which could be problematic, the idea in principle was that any kind of arrangement that the chamber entered into would be to offset the $250. I don't think that they're looking to make a profit as a landlord. But like I said, I don't see where that's provided for in the contract itself, so maybe that kind of amendment would be required.
Is everyone content on that point? Okay. Councillor Kenny and then Councillor Main.
Thank you once again, Your Worship, and thank you to the CEO for his explanation. But the one organization listed in this report is not a new business. It's not a new, it's been around forever. So if you're trying to help a new entrepreneur, I think that's great. But this one here, it's been around for a long time. A long time. And we're well aware of that, all of us sitting here. And so why are we giving them a break? It's just that's the only thing that bothers me about the whole arrangement, okay? Thank you.
Councillor Main?
I think you have to realize there's two community future development corporations. One no longer exists in Port Colborne. This one is from Thorold, and it's run by Venture Niagara Community Services. And it's going to fill the void for South Niagara because South Niagara no longer does the same work. We didn't get the funding this time. And I think it's a win-win situation. It's a win-win situation for the city and the chamber. These people deal actively with new businesses. What are you going to do, chase them away? We're trying to get new business. Are we able to do it? We need help. And to me, this is a win-win situation. For $250, it's well worth it.
Thank you, Mr. Main. Any further discussion? Shall we call a question? Any further discussion? No? All those in favor of the recommendation? Opposed? Carried. I believe that takes care of all items for separate discussion. Are there any notices of motion? There being none, I'd entertain a motion for adjournment. Moved by Councillor Dench, seconded by Councillor Doucette. All those in favor? Carried. Meeting is adjourned. We then move on to regular meeting of council 29-16, Tuesday, October 11, 2016, following the committee of the whole meeting. Call this meeting to order. Are there any addendum items, Madam Clerk?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. None this evening.
I entertain a motion to confirm the agenda. Moved by Councillor Doucette, seconded by Councillor Bodnar. All those in favor? All those in favor, see your hands, please. Carried. Are there any disclosures of interest? There being none, it should be so noted. I call for adoption of the minutes of the regular meeting of council 28-16 held on September 26, 2016. Moved by Councillor Bodnar, seconded by Councillor Desmarais. All those in favor? Carried. Adoption of determination of items requiring separate discussion. There being none, I call for motion to approve those items requiring separate, not requiring separate discussion. Moved by Councillor Doucette, seconded by Councillor Danch. All those in favor? Carried. Proclamations. Poppy Week, October 28, 2016 to November 11, 2016. Call for motion to adopt that proclamation. Moved by Councillor Doucette, seconded by Councillor Kenny. All those in favor? Carried. Minutes of boards, commissions, and committees. Minutes of the, looking for a motion to approve these, but minutes of the Environmental Advisory Committee of May 11, 2016. Minutes of the Social Determinants of Health Advisory Committee meeting of August 22nd, 2016. And minutes of the East Village Neighborhood Improvement Task Force meeting of June 20th, 2016 and July 25th, 2016. Motion in that respect. Councillor Desmarais, second by Councillor Danch. All those in favor? It's carried. Consideration of bylaws, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, that the following bylaws be enacted and passed. Bylaw 64078716 being a bylaw to authorize the execution of a contribution agreement between Her Majesty the Queen and Right of Ontario as represented by the Minister of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs for the Province of Ontario related to the funding provided by the Province of Ontario to the municipality under the Ontario Community Infrastructure Fund. Bylaw 64088816 being a bylaw to appoint auditors. Bylaw 64098916 being a bylaw to authorize entering into a lease agreement with the Port Colborne Wainfleet Chamber of Commerce respecting an office at the Roselawn Centre. And finally, bylaw 641090 being a bylaw to adopt, ratify, and confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Corporation of the City of Port Colborne at its regular meeting of October 11, 2016.
I'd entertain a motion to adopt those bylaws. Moved by Councillor Bodnar, seconded by Councillor Desmarais. All those in favor? Carried. At this time, we entertain a motion to go into closed session. Council will now proceed into closed session in order to address the following matters. Planning and Development Report 2016-166 concerning the potential acquisition of land pursuant to the Municipal Act 2001, subsection 239(2)(c). A proposed pending or acquisition of disposition of land by the municipality or local board. Call for that motion, please. Moved by Councillor Kenny, seconded by Councillor Desmarais. All those in favor? Carried. And we now move into closed session. Thank you all for being here.